Translation has always been regarded as something profoundly dynamic. Over the past 2 decades, the field of translation studies has undergone significant changes, giving birth to new strategies and norms that have influenced how translators operate, and consequently how target audiences perceive the translation, not only on a linguistic level, but also on a socio-cultural level. This thesis aims to examine translation challenges and the importance of the social, cultural, and historical political context in ensuring optimal translation of meaning. The thesis will focus on the role of the translator as an integral part of a social and linguistic process governed by norms, with an emphasis on translation activity viewed as a socially constructed phenomenon, with particular attention to the socio-cultural framework of the translation context. Through an analysis of literature starting with Edith Grossman's thoughts on the translation process, we say that translators must develop a keen stylistic sense in both languages by making an effort similar to what writers do during the process of writing a literary work. This is because the translator's task is to convey not only meanings, but also actual concept. Therefore, we outline the role of the translator, seen as a member of a social and linguistic system with its own norms, engaged in a communicative transaction that requires understanding and confrontation with different social and linguistic systems. We also approach the concept of realia that follow translation difficulties and the evolution of norms in the translation process, emphasizing the inextricable link between language, culture, and sociocultural context. Next, we highlight the social approach to translation, which has emerged as a new paradigm in its own right, recalling that a new paradigm is such only after it has proven to be a valid approach to any kind of translation problem. At this point, we highlight the similarity between the informant and the translator by pointing out that the informant in anthropology is a cultural mediator between the population under analysis and the anthropologist. It is the informant who is responsible for making the anthropologist understand the importance of the linguistic patterns, but also the cultural values of the population in question. Also worth noticing is the similarity that exists between the anthropologist and the translator, because just as the translators, the anthropologist also must have a deep understanding of the linguistic and cultural patterns of both cultures involved. At this point, it's clear that there is a link between culture, society, language, and consequently translation. Thus, keeping in mind the importance of the sociological approach in translating cultural words, each translation field has its own special vocabulary, and if for literary works the sociological approach turns out to be better than mere literary translation, on the other hand, other fields prefer different approaches. That appears to be the case with legal English, business English, and medical English. Language is the basis of communicative transaction, and since it is inextricably linked to culture, it cannot be overlooked by the translator. Even because in any communicative exchange, the way the speaker expresses himself allows us to understand the speaker's background, and thus to which group he belongs. It seems clear at this point that the translator is a mediator of culture and intercultural communicative functions. Since each language is contextually embedded in the culture and customs of its speakers, transferring them into another language becomes a far more complicated act than one might think. Applied linguistics is the branch of linguistics that deals with the practical application of language studies, and is particularly relevant within the translation studies field because it deals with the study of language and its development, drawing a thread through fields such as education, psychology, and sociology. Because, as we have already mentioned, language is an act of national identity as well. We have seen how context represents a fundamental tool for interpreting the novel and how it is imbued with socio-cultural meaning specific to a nation. For this very reason, the translator must be able to straddle both cultures by not leaving out such meanings because they often define the historical, political, and socio-cultural framework of the novel. Therefore, context is just as important as a good translation of the target text is. Language is the tool that allows us to express ourselves and communicate with others. From this point of view, we mentioned the polysystem theory, precisely because this theory identifies a very close link between language and culture and aims to explain the behavior and development of a literary system. Such analysis for translation is very useful. After these considerations, it becomes apparent that we should think of translation as a form of rewriting the text. Some literary works prove more challenging than others to translate precisely because of their sociocultural and historical political nature. Some significant example may be Les Miserables, To Kill a Mockingbird, Pachinko, and All Quiet on the Western Front. After analyzing the following novel, it becomes clear that a translation that does not include the transfer of cultural aspects as well as meanings is incomplete. Finally, we examined the evolution of the current translation approach, highlighting the emergence of the sociology of translation as a new paradigm, recalling the importance of norms as a guide for the translator and reiterating the crucial role of the translator as a mediator not only of language but also of culture. In today's transcultural era, the translator is responsible for ensuring that the meaning of the original text is uniquely understood and conveyed to the readers of the translated text. Language is the main property that defines and distinguishes human beings from other animals and is used to describe the reality around us, which is precisely why a linguistic act is an act of identity. In conclusion, we highlight the importance of context in translation and the crucial role of the translator as a cultural mediator, emphasizing that a deep understanding of the source and target cultures is essential for an effective translation that conveys the meaning and cultural identity of the original text.